Welcome to Christ King Parish in Wauwatosa. My name's Alex Ross. I'm one of the organ builders and voicers for Juget-Sinclair, and we're in the organ loft of Opus 52, and we're going to take a little tour inside the organ. There's going to be a bit of technical information for those viewers who are watching who are interested in organ building, and also I'll try and keep it more general information especially for the people of the parish who've been really curious to see this whole process, which has taken 6 weeks at the church now, come together. So if you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the comments and we will try to respond as best we can. Here we go. So here we are standing in front of the organ. I've already turned on the interior lights and one of the doors is open. Each of the doors comes with a special key which allows us to go inside. And the first thing that we see are the signatures of all the craftspeople who helped make this project come to life. The project took about a year and a half to complete from start to finish. And so the first thing we see here on the left is the pedal division. One thing that's special about this organ is it's a mechanical action organ, and most of the pedal division is also mechanical. So here we see the principal 8. Squeezed in between the casework and the frame here, we can actually see some of the mechanical action. And so these are 1 millimeter diameter carbon fiber trackers, which go up to the grand orgue, the first manual division. And these little bellows here, as you can see, it's only about as wide as my hand. And this is a pneumatic brake. It's for the self-adjusting mechanism, so the organ self-regulates its action with the changing of the seasons. The problem is if you played a really big chord or a cluster, the action would cipher. It would fail, essentially. The organ wouldn't play what you expected it to play. So when you turn the organ on, these little bellows inflate and they act as a brake which keeps this floating bar from moving. When you turn the organ off, then it's free to regulate itself again. On the right here, we have a bellows stack. And so there are 4 bellows for the entire organ, one for the pedal, a primary, one for the grand orgue, and one for the Récit. This MDF box here is actually the silencer for the wind that comes from the blower. MDF is a pretty dense material, even though it stands for medium density fiberboard, and it does a great job of sound damping. And the silencer is also full of rock wool and perforated sheet metal to make the silencer. The cube in MDF over here is where the blower lives, and the silencer system for this organ we're really pleased with. When the case is closed and you're standing in front of the organ and it's on in an empty church where there's no noise, you really can't tell that the organ's even on. It's that quiet. Right now we're underneath the Récit wind chest. So the Récit is where all the pipes for the second keyboard live. And so this is the underside of the wind chest where they stand. And so you can see one of the ends of the action, so more carbon fiber trackers, which come to these wooden squares, which then pull down on the brass wires, and inside that box there are pallets. Those are the valves that let the air into the pipes. We do use helpers on the bottom octave of notes, so whenever you have one of the bigger 16 or 8 foot flue stops, which use a lot of wind, and they're pretty slow to speak anyway generally, there's a pressure switch on top of the wind chest, and we'll see some of those in a minute, which senses when you have a note on, and so it relies on the wind, so it's guaranteed to be synchronized, as compared to if you put a contact on the key of the keyboard, for example, and then it will fire the magnet beside, and the channel with the magnet is the one that feeds the big wind guzzlers. And all this is just to keep the action from becoming too heavy when you get to the bottom of the keyboard. If it was completely mechanical, it would become extremely heavy to play in the first octave. So we help the organist out a little bit that way. On the left here, we can see the first pipe of the 32-foot bourdon. So because it's a stopped stop, It's actually only 16 feet long, but it's quite enormous. Like, here's my hands are pretty big, and just for scale you can see that it's a massive pipe. Above it we have the continuation, so the only stop that's shared electrically in the pedal is the Bourdon 32 with the sous-basse 16. So the sous-basse, the 16-foot part, begins here with the ones that are made in white pine. This is the end of the 32-foot. And so that's most of what we have to see here. We'll go back out for a second and stay on the floor level. And we can have a look at the rest of the pedal here. So this walkboard, this walkway that we see right here, is actually the wind chests themselves. We're looking at the upper table of the wind chests. Underneath my feet now there are wooden dividers which run this way, and for each channel in between those dividers there's one pallet at the end, and then 3 pallets per pedal, because there's so much wind demand in the pedal that we've divided it up into 3. If we did that with a keyboard, it would be far too heavy to play, but for the pedal it doesn't matter quite as much, but there's quite a nice pluck to this pedal. So the first stop we see here on the left is the trombone 16. The second octave, the second C, is in metal, and they're on wooden boots which switch to metal, and the first octave is just behind here, and it has wooden resonators, wooden pyramidal resonators which go way up to the top of the organ. If we look behind, we can see the principal 4 and the top of the contrabass says contrabass 16, so this wooden pipe here with interior rollers, for example, is part of the second octave of the contrabass. There's quite a few pipes hidden in here. This guy, way in the back with the wooden roller as well, is not a contrabass, so it looks very similar. It's about the same size as that contrabass pipe we just saw, but it's twice as long, and that is the 16-foot violon. It's an entirely wooden string stop, which is the first time that we've done that. So these ones in cherry, the pinker wood, these are smaller pipes of the violon as well. And that's not a wall behind them, that is a wall made of contrabass pipes. So the first octave of the 16-foot principal is in wood. At the end here we have we have a mask which I should get rid of. We have the first 5-6 notes of the montre 16. So the biggest note in the facade is actually F sharp, and it begins here in the back in wood, open wood, and we're really happy with the transition. This little box here is a concussion bellows. It's a shock absorber, so if you are playing very jerkily at the keyboards, rather than having the whole wind system shake, we put some of these shock absorbers here to help steady out the wind. On this side here we have something that looks very similar to the trombone that we just saw. It's actually the trumpet in the pedal and the clairon, 8 and 4-foot reeds, and they're actually shared mechanically. There's tiny little back check valves inside the toe board where they sit on, which prevents the air from going up and then back down into the neighboring channel. This is one of the reasons why this wind chest has a very unusual layout by octaves. So all the C's together, then all the C sharps together, then all the D's together, so that we can share by an octave. That layout also really helps us pack the violon stop in very compactly. Behind the trumpet we have a 4-rank pedal mixture. Here in white oak we have the 8-foot Bourdon, so another stopped stop. And then in pine we have the top of the sous-basse 16, and then this is the 8-foot principal that we saw earlier. So now we're going to go up to the second level, so I'll turn the camera off for a second. So here we are at the top of the ladder on the second level. One of the first things we'll notice is this box here, which is another concussion bellows, but it's also the tremolo for the grand orgue. And so it has this very clever mechanism which acts as the tremolo with minimal wind loss, minimal noise, and It's very easy to adjust. The old kinds of tremolos that we used often made a lot of noise, often were very fussy. They wouldn't let you pick the speed that you necessarily wanted if it wasn't in harmony with the wind system. Another thing we can see here is the Zimbelstern that comes from the previous Wix organ, which we were asked to integrate into the new organ. So now it is called clochette, which means little bells. So on my right here we have the grand orgue wind chests. And so the first stop that we can see here is the clairon 4, the 4-foot trumpet. Then we have the 8-foot trompette, which goes its full length, of course. After that we have the top of the Mont 16, which is from the facade and the bass. Then the flûte harmonique, and as you can see, it's got slots. This is the first time we've tried a flute with slots. It projects very well out of the chamber because of that. And then its wooden base. Then we have the top of the 8-foot montre. The bass is also in the facade. The 4-foot flute, which is a very, very wide scale with very narrow mouths. Then we have the cant and doublette, the mixture, so the upper work. Behind those tubes there we have the Bourdon 8-foot, the Princeton, and the Sélectionnel. There's also a mounted cornet, which we can see up here, which starts at middle C. In the back we can see the tops of some of the pedal pipes, so the one lower down there, the wooden one, is the top of the trombone, the pyramidal one. And we have a tall skinny one, which is the violon, and then behind that, its wider scale, is the contrabass. Now I'm opening the door to the Récit. It's difficult to get all of this in the frame, but so here's a look at the Récit. In these little boxes on the floor here, we have the pressure switches, which is a little pneumatic membrane with a magnet on it. And when you play the note, the pouch inflates, the magnet comes close to a reed switch, and that's the switch that closes the circuit. So in the middle here we have the base of the Bourdon 16. The box is quite spacious, and so we've got plenty of height for all of that. It continues here against the back wall, and then it finishes here at the back in metal, capped, no chimneys. We have the viol de gambe just in front of that, and the flûte 4, which is harmonic, and so it looks almost the same as the viola de gambe. Then we have our mutations for the cornet. And then we have some reeds. So we have the basson 16. Then we have a new type of clarinet that, to us, that we haven't tried before, and we're very, very pleased with how it sounds. So it's a clarinette à pavillon. It's got little bells on top of it, just like a real clarinet. And then in front of that we have the hautbois, which also has bells. And the hautbois actually starts as a basson as well, kind of like the basson 16, but skinnier. On the other side of the bridge, we have the clairon and trompette. We have the mixture, the 8-foot corps de nuit, which also has chimneys like the Bourdon and the Grand Orgue, but it's mostly just a different voicing. And then 4-foot principal rather, the Celeste and the 8-foot principal. One thing that's pretty unique to our work is this expression system. Many builders, the swell shades will open in parallel. Here they actually open and close in opposition. We find this gives a much more proportional crescendo, a much smoother crescendo that's not as sensitive in the nearly closed position. And then using felt and leather, it really seals the box effectively. You can really hide the sound this way. When they're closed, they're also left a little over width so that it forms a zigzag wall, and that does a couple things. One, when the shades expand in the summer and contract in the winter, they'll always be able to close tightly. If they closed into a flat wall and then they shrunk in the winter, it would leave gaps. The other thing is the zigzag wall. It just creates fewer parallel surfaces. Pipes in boxes like this often are prone to tuning problems, and that's one feature that we hope will help eliminate some of those problems. So that's about it, really. I mean, not much else to see. The base of the principal 8-foot is in wood. It eventually switches to metal, but that's pretty much Opus 52 in a nutshell. So if you have questions, like I said, please feel free to post them below, and we'll keep an eye on the comments and try and get back to as many of them as we can. Thank you for joining us.